If we are to reduce CO2 emissions, something which we have to, and we have to do it quickly, we have to tackle transport, and we can't wait to do it.
Transport is the last sector in Iceland that is using fossil fuels. So if we can kind of fix that bit, then the puzzle is complete.
Nordic Energy Research travelled through the Nordics, talking to thought leaders and exploring the potential of green transport fleets with
Nordic
solutions
to global challenges.
Yes, Iceland, we are number 2 in the adoption of electric vehicles. We are behind Norway.
What are the incentives that actually brought forward the battery electric vehicle in Iceland and Norway? People ask about that. That's actually the exemption of VAT. That was the main incentive.
The policy framework is very important, and it's the mix of incentives and taxes, like the carrot and the stick.
In Norway, we have high taxes on cars that pollute, but other countries can do it maybe a little bit differently. If they don't have taxes today, start at least to look into the possibility of taxing the most polluting cars and use that money to subsidize or incentivize the cars that we need to put on the road. This is a fair and a good way to do it, because the people that buy new cars have the most money. Most people don't buy new cars around, not in Norway either. 8 out of 10 cars that are sold every year are second-hand cars.
In 2014, there were less than 100 EVs in Iceland. Somebody had to, take a decision and start building the infrastructure to provide the basis for the EVs to come.
We needed to go in with support from the Energy Fund to support the more expensive fast charging stations.
And we have set up fast charging stations around the island.
To help people to get between areas in Iceland.
We always have to keep in mind that the solution is not to just not drive fossil fuel cars and start driving EVs. There are other things that need to change.
Car-centric cities have been the norm during the past decades, almost all over the world. However, they are not very people-centric and not very sustainable.
We have 80 cars per 100 people in Akureyri. Yeah, you don't have many places in the world that have a higher number. And our goal is to reduce that number down to 60 cars per 100 people within 15 years. With public transport, with electric bikes, with shared cars.
I think the adoption of battery electric car is on a very good pace in Iceland. Now we need this second wave, and that's a more complex step. First in the trucking or van industry in general.
Battery production produces also emissions. They use a lot of resources. And we see that designs have to be optimized for purpose and for local conditions. So smaller batteries, more frequent recharging will be a more sustainable way of decarbonizing transport.
The economies of scale are very important when you look at infrastructure. So you need a fleet or you need a large subsidy for the beginning.
If you look at the Nordic innovation system, public-private partnership and public guidance, public spending is instrumental in the early phase of change.
How do we make sure that the batteries are as long life as possible? That means per journey, but also per usage of the car or the vehicle. How do we make sure that we prolong things as much as possible, utilize as much as possible, and actually try use less of them in the first instance?
In the Nordic countries, we talk about green batteries and ethical batteries as opposed to those certain other types of places where these things are mined. Many of the global mining companies are trying to do something about it, but definitely there would be a role for Nordic countries to play in that development.
Being at the forefront with electric mobility is also creating great opportunities. At the moment, there's a lot happening in Norway when it comes to batteries, battery production. There are currently 4 different battery cell factories being planned. Factory for battery recycling being built now in the southern Norway. We have a lot of different industries and companies investing in battery industry.
Maritime transport is a really big part of our pollution. But electrifying a boat is possible here in Iceland, that we have started.
Our dream was to create the perfect platform for experiencing nature in the Arctic. That's why we chose to go electric. It's both a sustainability aspect in terms of the environment, but also in terms of the experience.
This living nature, the bird life, the whales, this is like a symphony. Listen.
Batteries are used for propulsion. They have like a certain lifetime, because when the life cycle is 30% less, then you might not want to use them anymore. But still, that 70% energy storage could be more than enough for a household or for other energy storage applications.
All islands depend heavily on the ferries. That's why we have innovated, because we knew we couldn't reach our goals without doing the e-ferry.
The electrification of the Ampere ferry was really what started the story in Norway. Ampere was the first battery electric ferry and started in operation in 2015. And now there are over 70 ferries operating along the Norwegian coast.
Delivering the needed energy for an electric ferry is basically the main hurdle. Building the ferry itself, I would say, is not that different from building a traditional ferry. But you need the power on land, otherwise you can't maintain the service at the frequency that the passengers require.
The electric catamaran project is a project that is a collaboration between ourselves, the Nordic Council of Ministers, and SEV, the electricity company here in the Faroes. And it is a way to demonstrate that you are able to produce and operate a workboat for the salmon farming industry here in the Faroes, purely run on electricity, which is produced by renewable sources.
The main challenge is that fossil fuel is so much cheaper than green alternatives. So it's hard to be competitive with today's regime. So we need to have new mechanisms which enhance the competitiveness of greener fuels.
We need to have alternative fuels, like make direct hydrogen applications, methanol, ammonia, and etc. So it's mainly to find the solution for the different applications which we need to solve to be able to be fossil fuel free. That's, I think, the key drive.
I think there are three main drivers for this transition in the maritime sector: the political decision makers, the cargo owners, and the capital or the investors. The cargo owners has a great responsibility. When they are asking for zero-emission logistic chains, then green shipping will be competitive.
It's inevitable that air travel will become electric. Governments are demanding it. Airlines want it. The technology is so superior that it would be insane not to do it. Norway wants all of their short-haul flights to be 100% electric by 2040. When governments go out and say this, it really creates a lot of momentum, and it gives also security to all other stakeholders to see that they can invest in this technology because there's a clear mandate that this is where it needs to be going. We've seen with electric cars, we've seen it with electric ferries, how important these government mandates are. So the Nordics are becoming the early adopters. The base technology for all of this is electrification. Our plane uses about the amount of batteries for 10 electric cars. And we can transport, with that, if we fly 10 times a day, we can transport 190 people every day, 365 days of the year, with the equivalent amount of batteries of 10 cars.
I don't believe we can wait around till we have 100% renewable electricity production in the world before we start the transition to vehicles that can run on that renewable fuel. We have to do both things as fast as we can.
It's a very complex change process, and in order to replicate the transition, a lot of support is required, and I think that's the obligation of Nordic countries and the Finnish industry and government to support other countries in making these steps in a successful manner.